Welcome to Murder Tale Shorts, thrilling, chilling true crime at its bloody best. I'm H.M. Lloyd. On Monday the 2nd of October 1931, two workmen went to Shaftesbury Avenue in London to prepare an empty shop for new tenants. They let themselves into the empty shop and took the "To Let" sign down from the window. In the dim light, one of the workmen noticed that a mannequin had been left abandoned, wearing its display clothes. The workman bent down and grabbed the mannequin's leg, but his blood began to run cold when he realised that he wasn't touching hard wax, but cold flesh and blood. Officially, Nora Upchurch was a dancer. Unofficially, she was a sex worker who worked under the name Nora Laverack. She was good at her job. She earned enough money to keep a trick pad in Soho and a private flat in Pimlico. Nora's body was examined by world-famous pathologist Sir Bernard Spilsbury. Sir Bernard concluded that Nora had been murdered inside the shop and that she'd been dead for approximately 2 days. The manner of her death was strangulation, with the killer most likely having used a belt or part of her dress as a ligature. Superintendent George Cornish of Scotland Yard was put in charge of the case. Cornish has a reputation for having been useless at his job. Indeed, more murders went unsolved during his time in charge of the murder squad than at any other period during its history. This was because, unlike his colleagues, Cornish was unwilling to beat confessions out of suspects or to simply frame people who he believed were guilty. The shop had been locked up tight, so Cornish wondered how Nora had gotten inside of the shop to be murdered there in the first place. It turned out that the letting agent had 2 keys to the shop, and one was missing. Apprentice Frederick Field said that he had lent his key to a man whose name he didn't know, whom he met in a pub because he was interested in renting the shop. The man had never returned the key. The police didn't believe this ludicrous story, and Field found himself being arrested and charged with Nora's murder. Despite initial confidence, the police were never able to find enough evidence to take Field to trial. He was therefore ultimately released. In July 1933, Frederick Field went to the Daily Sketch newspaper and sold them a full confession to Nora's murder. Field found himself being arrested again and charged with Nora's murder. This time, armed with a confession, the police were able to take the case to trial. In no time at all, Field found himself stood in the dock of the Old Bailey on trial before Mr. Justice Rigby Swift. Field had recanted his confession and pled not guilty. He stated that he finally wanted his day in court and to properly clear his name, as he was sick of people whispering behind his back. With no other evidence against Field, Mr. Justice Swift ordered the jury to return a not guilty verdict, which they duly did. On the 5th of April 1936, 48-year-old Beatrice Vilnius Sutton was found suffocated to death in her Clapham trick pad. Beatrice was a sex worker who was riddled with syphilis, and as such, she was forced to slum it at the lower end of the game. She had also walked with a strange gait due to having an obstructed anus due to polyps. Frederick Field had gone AWOL from the RAF. On the 25th of April 1936, the police finally caught up with him. The police were stunned when Field suddenly made a full, frank and detailed confession to Beatrice's murder. He said he was tired of life but too scared to kill himself, so he wanted the hangman to do it for him. He added, "I just murdered her because I wanted to murder someone." On the 13th of May 1936, Frederick Field found himself on trial for his life again at the Old Bailey, this time before Mr. Justice Charles. Once again, Field had recanted his confession and had pled not guilty. This time, however, there were other witnesses. Field's wife and mother-in-law both testified that Field had said there should be something interesting coming up in the papers about Clapham, before the news of Beatrice Sutton's murder had hit the papers. Field claimed that he was able to give such a detailed description of the murder scene and the injuries to Beatrice because he had been living in her cupboard. One evening he had been sitting in the cupboard when Beatrice came home with a client. Field claimed that he heard the murder, and when the murderer had left, he crept out and found Beatrice's body. The jury didn't believe a word of this Tommy rot, and it took them just 15 minutes to find Field guilty of Beatrice's murder. The black cap was lowered onto the judge's head, and Field was sentenced to death. Frederick Field was executed at Wandsworth Prison on the 30th of June 1936. In a final twist of irony, Field was executed by the notoriously incompetent hangman Albert Allen. Allen was drunk. He failed to calculate the right length of rope for the execution, and he failed to place the rope correctly around Field's neck. Rather than Field's neck breaking as he dropped, as should have happened, Field did the Newgate jig and thrashed at the end of the rope for several minutes as he slowly suffocated to death. For a much more detailed account of this fascinating true crime story, please read Murder Tales: The Hangman's Tales, available exclusively from Amazon. If you're watching this video on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to the channel. And remember, you can listen to the Murder Tales podcast, available wherever you listen to your favourite podcasts. Until next time, don't have nightmares.